No.
So,
Really saying,
actually, I think I'd almost prefer them to have a pill. But then I just think, we can't have pills for everything, can we? That's my problem.
Well, no.
Dream man in a kilt and a nose opener. Just sounding pretty special.
Yeah.
In 10 seconds, Alice, what's your strategy for dealing with another half snoring?
I think I'm going to be polite and say he doesn't snore, actually.
Well,
I think it's one of the
I think it's
lucky...
a big problem. But seriously, it's a big problem in a lot of marriages, actually.
Yeah.
People sleep,
I would just move into another, well, actually, we don't have another room. I think I'd sleep, on the floor.
Like everything else, blame it on the dog. Thank you very much indeed, Robert Crampton. Thank you very much indeed, Alice Thompson. Great pleasure to speak to both of you. Look forward to speaking to you again as we progress in our journey of this show. Speak to you both again soon. Thank you.
On DAB Digital Radio, on the Times Radio app, and on your smart speaker. Politics from every angle. Times Radio.
It's 12 o'clock. I'm Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio in association with SSE. Find out how they're investing billions in energy infrastructure at sse.com/change. In a moment, it's Prime Minister's Questions Unpacked. But first, a look at the headlines this lunchtime. A man's murder conviction from more than 30 years ago has been quashed by the Court of Appeal. Oliver Campbell was jailed between 1991 and 2002 for murdering a shopkeeper. Mr. Campbell's lawyers claimed his jury was not told the full extent of his brain damage as a baby, nor did it hear evidence that another man had been named as the gunman. The Chancellor has said that the economy can't be turned around in a month. GDP stagnated in July, making it the second consecutive month of zero growth. The Foreign Secretary and the US Secretary of State have arrived in Kyiv for talks about weapons. The US is understood to be considering allowing Ukraine to use long-range missiles to target inside Russia, rather than just in defence. Donald Trump's repeated claims from last night's TV debate that immigrants in Ohio are eating people's pets. He's repeated those claims again, and Kamala Harris has said she is happy to have another debate, but he has not committed. We will have a full news roundup at 1 p.m, but now live on Times Radio and on the Times Radio YouTube channel, it's time for this.
PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio. Unpacking the politics and cutting through the crossfire.
Well, yes, indeed, it is time for PMQs Live, and PMQs is just beginning, and we'll bring you the first question from Rishi Sunak to Keir Starmer when it comes. I'm joined by the Sunday Times chief political commentator Tim Shipman. Hello, Tim.
Hello.
And I'm also joined by the comedian Ria Lina. Hello, Ria.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Is
now,
it? Yeah.
Morning, well, it's just stopped being morning. Now, Tim, we're sort of in your hands because you've been doing this for years, and I'm sitting here winging it.
Hugo.
Yeah, but
I think winging it is very much the style of
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah, I know, but winging it the first time, winging it the 50th time, it's a bit different. I've sat where Ria's sitting.
Say what you see.
Say what you see. I'm not going to ask you, Tim, if you're a frequent watcher of PMQs, because one would hope. Ria, are you?
I do the classic. I watch the highlights. When something good has happened, I watch it. Occasionally I've flipped it on and, Keir's long gone or the Prime Minister's long gone and just some poor backbenchers doing their question to an empty room.
Yeah,
But-
yeah. No, I see that what I always struggled with it always came up for me in my past incarnations when I was a TV critic. PMQs would always turn up at the sort of exactly the point on a Wednesday where I'm
a
sort
bit
of
close to lunch as well.
Well, no, there is that. But I'd also be like in a panic watching whichever HBO drama, and you kind of think you just can't really sort of break off from I don't know.
Well, there were times when sort of flicking from Game of Thrones to PMQs was sort of spot the difference, really.
Yeah. Something that we've seen quite a lot lately at PMQs is that Keir Starmer keeps calling Rishi Sunak the Prime Minister.
Four times last week.
4 times last week, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think someone will have said a word?
I don't know, but the Speaker got it wrong as well, so they're all
Really?
struggling to adapt. And Sunak sort of still behaves a bit like he's the PM.
Yes.
In a way. His
Yeah.
sort of approach is...
But he sort of...
It's the same kind of, I've got a folder full of facts here. It's just I'm going to throw them at you rather than throw them back at you now. So
Yeah.
The style hasn't changed greatly.
It's a bit like when you have a new you have a new partner and you keep calling them by the old partner's name, just as habit.
Does that happen to you a lot? Does it, Hugo?
I haven't had a new partner since 1997. I wouldn't know, but I'd imagine it's a bit like that. No,
I don't know. They've all just changed seats. It's like when you and your siblings all change bedrooms and it feels different, but it's still the same house.
do you feel it weird at all that Rishi Sunak is still there?
Well, no, it's understandable why he's still there, but obviously they're looking to replace him, aren't they? That's happening in the background. It's the most uneventful leadership selection process. Like it's like a byline on page 5. They go, oh, by the way, someone else got.
But there's
knocked out.
4 of them left, and they get to go to conference and make a speech. It would have been much better if they'd all had 1 week at Starmer at PMQs.
Oh, that is good.
They could have trialled them there.
Why didn't
Forget
they do
the sort
that?
of platform speech to conference. What the job of leader of the opposition actually is, that in terms of what the bit that people notice, it's doing PMQs. Why not? Why not give them a week each at the Prime Minister?
That is genuinely the best and perhaps first useful political suggestion I've ever heard anyone make on radio. What a great idea!
Anyway.
Make them audition. I'm in favour.
Have you said that before? I think we might have the first question coming up. Let's have a listen.
We come to the leader of the opposition, Rishi Sunak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join with the Prime Minister in his words about Her late Majesty the Queen, but also in his words about the Princess of Wales? She's been in the thoughts of everyone across the country, and I know everyone in the House will be delighted and relieved at the progress that she has made. May I also, Mr. Speaker, take this opportunity to pay tribute to Nicholas Howard. This is his last Prime Minister's Questions after supporting 8 consecutive Prime Ministers through these sessions. Never my favourite part of the week, but his commendable service made it far more manageable. Mr. Speaker, yesterday Labour MPs voted to remove the winter fuel payment from over 10 million British pensioners, including those with just £13,000 of income. With that decision debated and made, it is now important that the House understands the full consequences of the government's choice. So can I very specifically ask the Prime Minister, will he now publish the impact assessment before the House rises?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is this. They left a £22 billion black hole. Hid it from the OBR. Richard Hughes is absolutely clear. It's the largest year-ahead overspend outside of the pandemic. Now, of course, when it comes to mitigations and impacts, we put those in place. Ramping up pension credit, dealing with housing benefit and linking it, something the party opposite didn't do for years. And because of the tough decisions that we're making to stabilise the economy, we can make sure that the triple lock shows that increases in pensions will outstrip any loss of payments. But before he complains about us clearing up his mess, perhaps he'd like to apologise for the £22 billion black hole.
Well, straight back in there. Tim Shipman, look, I've got many questions, but your first thoughts?
There's nothing sexier than publish an impact assessment, or else, is there?
Tell me about the impact assessment. Is there an impact assessment?
Yeah, before every piece of legislation, they'll have gone through and worked out, how many winners there are, how many losers there are, what does it all mean, and quite often, obviously, the government doesn't necessarily want to advertise the full impact. But yeah, that's very Rishi Sunak, isn't it? Let's get this out.
Nicholas Howard, who he paid tribute at the beginning. He
is a very long-serving civil servant who, throughout both Tory and Labour administrations, has done PMQs prep. And they always have in the room a bunch of sort of clever, witty political advisors. When it was David Cameron, you had Boris Johnson, George Osborne and David Cameron all sitting in the room helping. But Nicholas Howard was there as well.
Right.
And that was true under Blair and Brown, and certainly under the 92 Conservative Prime Ministers we've had since. He's served them all, and now he's done his time. But very few, most memoirs of politicians are rather boring, and certainly memoirs of officials are almost unreadable. But I would have thought his might be quite intriguing.
You can see that being quite fiery. Ria, what did you hear in all that?
I heard a yes or no question that didn't get answered.
Yes.
That's what I heard.
Go on.
I'm still amazed at how you can hide, how they hid this 22 million black hole from the OBR, how they hid it from the Shadow Chancellor, because I thought they had access to that kind of stuff. So was it that it was hidden, or was it that they weren't looking? I find all of that very suspicious. But am I right? He said that the pension reform will make up for the loss in winter payments, but aren't the pension reforms not happening till April? Am I getting that?
That's true, but so it's interesting that he even made that argument, because last week he failed to make that argument, and you would have thought. But actually, are we better off is probably quite a good argument for the Prime Minister.
Only if you get through to April. So it's like gladiators for pensioners. If you get through this winter, we shall reward you.
Those that survive will prosper.
Right.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I guess he couldn't make it last week. The numbers hadn't come through yet last week, had they?
Well, I think he was still...
On the impact report?
I think we were...
Well, quite.
I think we were slightly surprised he didn't make that argument last week.
Yeah, OK, well, let's go. We've got one more question. Let's hear.
Mr. Speaker, this has got... Mr. Speaker...
I want to hear the question.
Mr. Speaker, when I was in government, I delivered record increases in the state pension. We protected the winter fuel payment and we gave pensioners cost of living benefits. He's the one that's taking money away from pensioners on £13,000, Mr. Speaker. But this has got nothing to do with the public finances. His own Chancellor just this morning, his MPs may not have been listening to her, his own Chancellor this morning admitted that she would prefer it if this policy didn't even raise any money, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, the government would not have made this decision without an impact analysis. And yesterday, the Energy Minister confirmed that. So I ask, very simply again, why won't he publish the assessment now?
Mr. Speaker, I remember the days when the Conservative Party used to be concerned about balancing the books. They've left a £22 billion black hole. Responsibility for this decision lies there. The only way to rebuild our country and invest in our public services and make sure everyone is better off is if we clear up their mess and deal with the £22 billion black hole. But, Mr. Speaker, last week we learned that the Shadow Housing Secretary was calling for means testing of winter fuel payments. Now it turns out that the Shadow Paymaster General agrees with her and even boasted about texting his own mother saying she didn't need the payment. Until he apologises for the mess they've created, he's no position to criticise the action that we're taking.
So I feel a bit cheated. It's their own time they're wasting, but ours too. That's the same question just twice. There's not a new question there. Look, I suppose... he obviously sort of sensed blood with this impact assessment thing, Ria. Yeah, just bang it again.
Well, it's a game, isn't it? I'm amazed that Keir Starmer has said he's going to hold the entire government to ransom until someone says sorry. Really?
We might be waiting a while.
Yeah. Just going, have you not been in government? That's not how it works.
Tim, making the point there, as Starmer did, that Kemi Badenoch is sort of reported to have backed cutting winter fuel allowance.
And the Shadow Paymaster General, who I can reveal to you, is John Glenn.
Thank you. Really?
I had to Google it.
Isn't he the one who went to space? How surprising. That's true, isn't it? The Conservatives, all will instinctively agree with this policy.
I think that the issue is, where do you draw the line? I mean, there are a whole bunch of rich pensioners who probably don't need this money but have got very used to having it. Pensioners turn out to vote. They generally vote Conservative, and that's why the Tories are making a big song and dance out of it. They are hoping that the thing that remains in people's minds is that the first thing Starmer did was cut pensioners' allowances. Starmer is hoping that the first thing in people's minds is that he and Rachel Reeves were prepared to take tough decisions to be responsible on the economy. The problem is that they've got themselves in a bit of a mess, because of the 22 billion black hole that they keep talking about, this only fills 1.5 billion of it, and Rachel Reeves is now saying, well, we hope it fills none of it, because
what's that about?
Well, that's sort of saying, oh look, well, we've brought in this policy, but we hope people continue to get it. There's all these people who don't even claim it at the moment. Why don't they go and claim it? This is their attempts to sort of mitigate it.
Oh, I see.
This is sort of it's had a reaction that is far beyond what they expected it to have, and they can't go back on it, and they sort of own it now. So it's one of those kind of little things, a bit like the Lib Dems and tuition fees, which may have tremendous resonance at the next election, or everybody might have moved on to worry about something else.
Are you surprised that this was both the first question and indeed the second question, when there's the open goal of prisoners?
No, not really. I mean, he's got 4 more questions to go. He can do 3 and 3 quite easily. I think what they want is for PMQs doesn't create news very often. It creates sound bites for the party faithful. I can see the newspapers who are against this plan saying, Starmer 3 times, twice, 3 times, 4 times, refused to rule, hand over the impact assessment.
Well, I mean, that's like kind of it's building a new meme. Like that's the first I've heard of the impact assessment. We're going to hear it a lot more.
We're all going to be experts on impact assessments, just as we became on vaccines and everything else.
Do we need to see the impact report? If the impact report came in and it said it will make no difference, then he wouldn't have made a decision on it, would he?
If that's what it says, then why wouldn't they show it to us, Ria?
No, but that's what I'm saying, is that it obviously said something, or he wouldn't have made such a drastic decision off the back of it.
The Tories probably know what it says as well.
Yeah.
And the question is whether the bigger impact politically is when they publish it or if they continue to refuse to publish it. I suspect it works either way for the Conservatives.
I think the drama, we're missing the drama. He needs to get a big binder out from under the table, just slam it down, here you go.
Yeah. It's just whenever anyone's trying to make trying to push a thing into the news like this impact assessment is happening now, it just reminds me of Mean Girls. I think it's where Gretchen says, "Stop trying to make fetch happen." Trying to establish a new slang. And basically right now, I think what's happening is Rishi Sunak is trying to make fetch happen. Let's hear another question.
Mr. Speaker, they're shouting now, but those arguments didn't even convince 50 of his own MPs, who suddenly found that they had urgent business elsewhere yesterday, Mr. Speaker. But we know why he's hiding the impact assessment. The Labour Party's own previous analysis claimed that this policy could cause 3,850 deaths. So are the numbers in his impact assessment higher or lower than that?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we're taking this decision to stabilise the economy. That means we can commit to the triple lock. By committing to the triple lock, we can make sure that payments of state pension are higher, and therefore there's more money in the pocket of pensioners, notwithstanding the tough action that we need to take. But he goes around pretending that everything's fine. That's the argument he tried in the election. And that's why he's sitting there and we are sitting here.
Yeah. So that's 3 questions. Same question again and again. When will you still trying to make fetch
a bit
happen.
edgier though, hasn't it?
I want the Candyman to show up or something at this point.
Well, the thing about Labour's own policy report that they did beforehand. Tell us about that, Tim.
Well, I mean, if you're going to bring in changes, even in opposition, you're going to look at the likely impact of them. I suspect the official impact is not assessment is not vastly different from that. It's obviously a bit embarrassing if you're doing something on purpose that's going to kill 4,000 people, but that's one does reflect that we're only a couple of years removed from literally hundreds of thousands of people dying. Have we recalibrated what deaths mean?
I feel like that was the comeback that Starmer missed. Hang on a second, your impact report says 8,350, but
3,850.
Oh, was it 3,000? Oh, I'm sorry, I wrote that the wrong.
Yeah.
So wait, only 4,000 people, not 8,000 people.
I think so.
You think he should have stood there and said, "That's nothing. You killed 500,000."
Well, but they did, didn't they? They had a lot of policies that led to. We know now that our death toll from the pandemic was higher than maybe it could or should have been.
But saying at least I'm killing fewer people than you, that's not very prime ministerial. That's not very prime ministerial.
No, much better to demand an apology and stamp your feet until you get one.
Isn't the weird thing about this? This is one of these debates. One of these issues where the parties are both on the wrong sides. Right, because one of them's in government. If the Conservatives were in government, I appreciate they've got they want to sort of suck up to pensioners. If it wasn't pensioners, if it was another group, it's exactly the sort of cut they'd be likely to make, and it's exactly the sort of opposition Labour would be likely to make.
Well, they'd have done it to welfare instead of pensioners. That's what they would have done, which indeed they did, of course.
But a means testing, a means testing thing is inherently Tory.
You seem upset by the very notion of politics, Hugo.
I mean, welcome to my life. The mention there of the 50 MPs who rebelled, or rather abstained.
Yes, they were given permission to wander off.
Is that how big a deal is that?
Well, it's not that big a deal, is it? Because nobody, people did not rebel. They were sort of gently told, go and have a kebab, old son, and you'll be, and nothing will come of it. It's sort of embarrassing, but it's. No one remembers now. Tony Blair had all sorts of problems over welfare and stuff in his early months, and that didn't stop him being Prime Minister for 10 years.
It's not huge.
And it's not what we hate him most for now, so...
Yeah, it's not the thing that's
it's not the thing that stuck with him.
It's remembered as being the glory days, in fact, isn't it? Before all that. Let's hear the fourth question.
Mr. Speaker, today pensioners watching will have seen that the Prime Minister has repeatedly refused to admit or to publish the consequences of his decision, and we will continue holding him account for that. But changing topics, Mr. Speaker, today is Back British Farming Day, where we recognise that British farmers produce food that is higher quality, has higher welfare standards and higher environmental standards than imported food. And at a time of increasing global volatility, they are also crucial for our food security and national security. Can he therefore confirm, whether he will be adopting the NFU's recent proposal to enshrine a national food security target in law?
Prime Minister.
Well, food security is really important. I'm glad he's raised that. We have talked to the NFU about this, and rural issues are really important, and that's what we fought the election on, where we've got a lot of rural constituencies sitting behind me now. We'll continue to talk to the NFU. We do take food security very, very seriously.
Bit of a curveball there.
Yes, he wasn't expecting that. He's got all his answers ready on prisoners released, hasn't he?
It sounds like Rishi Sunak, like me, got sent a very nice hamper by the NFU and wants to say thank you.
Well, and also win back the rural communities who abandoned the Tories at the election. I suspect where this is going is that the NFU wants sort of food security and buy British, and Starmer is trying to go to Europe and do a veterinary and food and perishables deal with the EU, which would
get dodgy French meat.
Well, which would reduce prices, would be Labour's plan, but would run in the face of what the NFU is demanding, which is why Starmer was tiptoeing fairly cautiously around that. We've talked to them. Well, yes, of course you have. You've listened to them, and you've not yet done what they asked you to do. It's really important, which is what people say when they've got nothing written on the notes in front of them.
Yeah. Did you notice, Ria, and for anyone watching on YouTube as well, the way they're all wearing their wheat sheafs? Is that the right word?
It's a wheat sheaf.
It's a wheat sheaf. A lot of people in Parliament.
Because it's Back British Farming Day.
Because it's Back British Farming Day.
Now, catch me up. We have some of the best food, from our British farms in the world. Is that with or without the chlorine? Because I don't know where we got to on that.
I don't think we have the chlorine.
We don't have the chlorine. Well, that's great. I think that's wonderful.
I think we've agreed we can, in theory, have the chlorine, but we haven't yet begun to have the chlorine.
The Brits don't want the chlorine, apart from when they go to the States and eat chlorinated chicken
and don't notice
by
the difference.
Absolute hundredweight.
Yeah, and don't necessarily notice the difference, yeah.
But we don't want the chlorine. But we do want. My understanding is, isn't it helpful? Wouldn't it be good for the farmers if they can start to re-export more easily to the EU? I mean, I know that you don't want this meat coming from France that's horse, but at least they label it as horse.
No,
which
they don't.
We don't.
No, they don't.
What do they label it as?
There was a big scandal a few years back.
We were as involved in that as they were. I mean, but at least if you buy a horse steak, it's a horse steak.
Well, yes, yeah. I suppose
you buy lasagna.
Look, food security. Well, it could be. Never mind. Food security. That was the main issue there. I mean, it's one of these things that sort of faded from the agenda. I can remember spending at least 2 months at the start of COVID being absolutely terrified about food security. I can remember I was writing leaders for the Times, sitting upstairs in my attic, and like basically having to phone round people, and they were going, "Well, yeah, there's food for about another 6 weeks. Not quite sure what will happen after that. The harvests aren't happening, and they all need to happen in like sort of Ukraine anyway." And and now it has retreated as an issue.
At the beginning of the pandemic, we genuinely stocked up on pasta from, wait for it, TK Maxx.
Really, I didn't even know they sold it.
They have. If you don't know that, they have this weird and wonderful food section.
Fashionable pasta.
Very multicolored, different shapes.
Wow.
When I launched my raids into the supermarket, it was loo roll and pasta. They were my two. I wasn't leaving without either of them.
Of course, too much of one, you don't need the other.
I remember going to the garage on the corner of my house, and we were badly out of toilet paper. There was one packet of toilet paper left that had a rip, and one of the rolls had been dragged through the mud, and no one wanted to buy it, but it was the last one there.
Didn't you?
Still bought it, still ate it. Let's take another question.
I'm not sure I did hear a specific answer, Mr. Speaker, but farmers also do great work to preserve the beauty of the British countryside, and something I'm sure that the Prime Minister will appreciate, given his newfound preference for landscapes over political portraiture. But when it comes to land use, there are currently protections in place to ensure that the most productive farmland is used for food production rather than alternatives like solar. So does he agree that it is not appropriate or right that developers with a vested interest grade the quality of that farmland themselves? And will he look at making that process independent?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, rural communities were neglected under the last government. Confidence was at an all-time low. And thousands of food and farming businesses have been forced out of business. Now, of course, we will work with them. Of course, we'll get the balance right. But we're again picking up, clearing up the mess and rebuilding our country.
Okay.
Niche point. Okay, followed by general point.
Okay, so I have questions about that question. First up, Ria, this is your area. There was a joke. Yeah?
In what they did?
The landscape joke.
Yeah. Landscape versus portraits.
That was pretty good.
Actually, I enjoyed it. I did laugh.
I
did laugh at that.
Good,
I thought that was quite good.
I
did think that was quite good.
A lot of people listening don't know what the joke was.
It's not for them, it's for us. Wait, so, Tim, this is one for you. I don't know what that question was about.
Well,
something land grading.
Well,
something.
Let's just say that he's moved Margaret Thatcher's portrait and replaced it with.
But he can't have thought. I want to.
For those that don't know what we're blabbling on about,
he can't have thought.
And then developer grade, blah blah quality. Who decides?
But it's all to do.
It's all to do with permitted development, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
And Labour is planning to reform the planning laws and make it easier for people to build on rural bits of land, essentially. And they're effectively saying. The farmers get to decide this because some of them want to sell their land to make lots of money from houses, and shouldn't that be more independent? I think that's what it's about. But the fact that I'm only about 8.5% sure that that's what it's about tells you what a duff question it is.
Did he just want to ask?
It seems like a reasonable question, though. The question is, who gets to decide how the land is used? Should it be the people that want to sell and make money from it, or build on it and develop it? Or should it be independently decided how it's used, and then they can either sell or develop however it's been independently determined? Seems like a fairly straightforward question. But I think Keir Starmer stayed up late last night and watched the American debate, because his answer was as obtuse as some of those.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I couldn't quite follow that. I just wonder if he maybe just came up with that question in the first place because he was like, I need to have a question which I can begin with the joke about this portrait thing. I need to have a question, something to do, something to do with landscapes.
We've all done that. We've all written a great joke and gone, how do I crowbar this in?
Absolutely.
But it's classic Sunak that he doesn't sort of explain what he's on about in the question.
Yeah.
So that people watching know what he's talking about.
Yes. Well,
which sort of was one of his problems, as Prime Minister, was that he was a bit in the weeds and he wasn't really able to.
Is it because he assumes everyone knows already, or because he... Anyway, I think we have...
Or that he doesn't care.
We've got... I think it's the last question. Should we have that?
Mr. Speaker, as a glimpse, in Wales, the Labour government hammered farmers, hitting them with top-down eco-targets. And Labour's own assessment of those plans said that it would lead to thousands of job losses, less food security, and destroy rural incomes, while farmers described it as bleak and damaging. So can he reassure English farmers that he won't threaten their livelihoods, and can he rule out imposing those same top-down targets here?
Prime Minister.
We will work with farmers across the whole of the United Kingdom, as we've made clear, to support them. But here we are, absolutely clear, no contrition, no responsibility for the economic black hole, the broken NHS, the prison crisis, the ruinous legacy of 14 years of failure. We've started rebuilding the country, renters reform, house building, GB Energy, National Wealth Fund, Border Security Command, I could go on. Whilst they try to rewrite history, we're getting on with building a better country for the future.
Okay, look, Rishi Sunak may be prepared to ask 3 questions about farms, but I'm not. So, Tim, my question is, why didn't he ask a question about the prisons? Why is the only mention of prisons come from Keir Starmer himself?
Well, that was quite telling, wasn't
it?
Yes. He's not very good at politics.
Is he frightened that it'll come back and bite him because it's essentially his fault?
Well, I think, but that doesn't seem to have bothered him about any of the other things he was asking about.
I'm so sorry. Do you mean Rishi?
Yes.
Just because with this roundabout...
Yes.
Right.
Why were you not expecting Rishi Sunak to ask a question about 1,700 people getting let out of prison yesterday?
It gives Starmer
swilling champagne in the street,
doesn't it?
I think he's specifically chosen farming as a means of he wants to unsettle Keir Starmer in a way. And it's very clear that Keir hasn't prepared on these topics at all. He hasn't prepared on the farming. He annoyingly didn't put his wheat sheaf on this morning, pin. And I'm sure he's kicking himself because he would have loved to just go, I care as well. Look at my pin.
It's on the bedside table.
And every local paper that's running local sort of coverage of British Farming Week or whatever is going to probably pick some of this up. That's being slightly generous.
Yeah, but if you look at the front pages today, like 90% of the front pages had mention of prisoners being early released, and you've got Keir Starmer. He's a former DPP.
That's the kind of populist politics that Rishi Sunak's never engaged in, though, isn't it?
Is it?
Which, as Starmer pointed out earlier on, is why he's standing on one side and Sunak's now standing on the other.
It's like he's already prepping for the next election by swooping up farmers and old people and going, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Don't worry, I got you. But isn't it? It's so strange because we're in this two-party system that we just rotate, and flip back and forth, because now Keir's having his own opposition research used against him. He's just sitting there going,
So a WhatsApp from Craig for Tim. He says, question for Tim. Why is Sunak letting Starmer get away with the 22 billion black hole? It's true. He said it several times and he hasn't hit back on that at all.
Well, because the independent folk say that there's something in it, bluntly.
Right.
The OBR have looked at it and said, this was there's something there. So.
Well, so you think it would just be indefensible? Yeah.
I'm not saying it's indefensible. You can defend anything where it comes to numbers, but it's it would be a waste of Sunak's time to try and make a big thing out of it. I mean, he can make broader points about, he brought inflation down and that sort of thing, but it does seem like they'd overspend.
Yeah, indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of the main exchanges from PMQs Unpacked. Up next, Tim and Ria are staying with me, and Lara Spirit will come rushing in with, I believe, with the best of the rest from PMQs. Yes, I believe she will. I think, she's going to come rushing in and join us with the best of all the other questions. But that's just right after the news.
Jane Garvey and Fee Glover, this afternoon from 2 on Times Radio.
We'll be speaking to a US pollster on how the showdown between Harris and Trump landed with the voters they need to impress.
We'll ask whether Apple's new AI tech is terrifying or the dawning of a brave new world.
And best-selling crime novelist and my fellow Scouser Linda LaPlante will tell us all about her new book, Getting Away with Murder.
This afternoon from 2 on Times Radio.
The Story, the award-winning daily news podcast from The Times. Listen in the Times Radio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Times Radio.
Growing a business takes a powerful team. People who think big, raise the bar, and smash expectations. People who are feeling at their best, not worried and waiting for healthcare. If you're ready to take your business to the next level, you need a team that's ready to deliver. Bupa helps your people to get health worries seen and sorted with fast access to expert advice, including GPs and physios. Your team will have fast-track help for muscle, bone and joint problems, plus mental health services and cancer cover as standard, so they're ready for whatever life throws at them, at home and at work. Take your business further by building a happier, healthier and more motivated team. And as prevention is better than cure, your team will have access to our digital wellbeing services, including 1,500 gym classes, mindfulness programs, and expert content. That's better for your team and better for your business. Get ready to power your growth with small business health insurance that powers your people. Let's get growing. Search Bupa Small Business.
Listen to Jane Garvey and Fee Glover's unique perspective on the day's stories every Monday to Thursday afternoon from 2.
Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio with SSE, investing over £20 billion in homegrown energy. SSE, we power change. Verify at sse.com/change.
Hello, and yes, I lied to you. No news. We'll get that later. It's week one. I apologise. Let's take a look at some of the other exchanges at Prime Minister's questions. We're joined now by Times Red Box reporter Lara Spirit. Hello, Lara.
Hello.
How was it?
It was actually quite interesting.
Yeah?
For reasons we'll go into, yeah. We had Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, of course.
His first question at PMQs?
I believe so. Tim, is that right? His first question at PMQs?
I think so, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
It felt like his first question at PMQs.
Oh, wow. A bit like this feels like my foot. Never mind.
In fact, I mean, we'll listen to it now, but you'll notice that I think he was slightly too far away from the microphone, which I do think actually did make a difference. And the other reason why the question, I think he will feel was slightly unfortunate given the circumstances, was that the MP for Southport, Patrick Hurley, spoke about the impact of the killings on his community as the question that preceded this one. So just take a listen and you'll see what I mean.
Let's hear it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday we witnessed some extraordinary celebratory scenes outside Britain's prisons where, in some cases, serious career criminals were released. And this to make way for, yes, rioters, but equally those who've said unpleasant things on Facebook and elsewhere on social media. Does the Prime Minister understand there is a growing feeling of anger in this country that we are living through two-tier policing and a two-tier
I'm angry to be put in a position of having to release people who should be in prison because the last government broke the prison system. And the Prime Minister was repeatedly warned. He had his own release scheme. He was repeatedly warned that he had to adopt the scheme that we put in place. The former Justice Minister said if we don't do it, we'll have to get down on our knees and pray. The police chiefs made it absolutely clear in a letter to him before the election that he needed to take action, saying that they wouldn't be able to discharge their duties and saying the risk was loss of an ability to detain suspects. That means, Mr. Speaker, an inability to arrest people committing offences. That's how bad it was. And they warned the Leader of the Opposition that further delays until after the general election will increase the risk significantly. What did he do? He delayed and increased the risks.
Shalom, kids.
Right, Laura Spirit, what do you make of that? That's basically the question that Rishi Sunak never quite got around to asking.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you think, but I'm surprised that Keir Starmer went into a semi-boilerplate answer about prisons that we've, of course, heard many times from ministers in the previous days as we approached the release of more than 1,600 prisoners yesterday. I'm surprised that he didn't talk about the two-tier policing question head on. He just didn't address it. Yeah. Which to me was I don't know.
Which even a lot of Tories say it's not two-tier, it's just haphazard, and it kind of, yes, you do get different outcomes, but it's not planned that way. It's just a mess.
Exactly. I mean, you would think that he would condemn that head on. I mean, the Times has done some fantastic work in exposing the myth of that idea that white working classes are policed more heavily than other communities, and I'm surprised, especially given Keir Starmer's former career, that he didn't see that as an opportunity, really.
Do you think, Ria, he just had his notes for the question about prisons and he heard this is the question about prisons, so I'll give my answer to the question about prisons?
Oh, very much. It was a pre-prepared answer. He just went, I've done my homework on this one. Yeah. And he read it out.
I know more about this than farms.
And he read it with confidence. But I've noticed that even actually when he was in the opposition, is that he doesn't have an instinct for the kill. Which I think is interesting for someone who was DPP, is that he doesn't have that kind of targeted. Here we go. Yeah, kill shot. He doesn't.
Yeah. Do you think so? I mean, would you say, Laura, that Nigel Farage, that went how he wanted it to?
I mean, perhaps I think that the delivery of that. Did you notice the microphone?
That was a bit weird.
Telling you, I mean, just compared.
And he was getting jeered a lot for something that's a pretty mainstream criticism these days. And it's very clear that whatever Farage says in the House is going to get a lot of raspberries from the people sitting around him.
Although, that is, I mean, that did seem to me like the question the opposition, you'd expect that was the question the opposition was going to be asking, and if he's trying to be the opposition, I don't know. Laura, what else have you got for us?
We have Sir Ed Davey, of course, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, and now permitted 2 questions at Prime Minister's Questions rather than just one.
Let me guess, were they both on farming?
Neither of them, would you believe it?
I would have said water sports.
Exactly. Neither on that. So when you talk to Liberal Democrats at the moment, they will say they think that their approach to this winter fuel payment cut is more impressive than the Conservative approach, which is to say that they accept that there is this £22 billion black hole, but they just don't think that cutting money from some vulnerable pensioners is the right way to fund it. And this is Ed Davey's attack on that basis again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself and my party with the comments made earlier by the Prime Minister about our amazing late Queen, and also join him in sending our best wishes to Her Royal Highness, Princess of Wales. I don't think anyone could have not been moved by her powerful video, and we hope that you'll make a full and speedy recovery. When it comes to fighting cancer, we know all too well that every day counts. But in the last year of the last government, there were over 100,000 patients waiting more than 2 months just to start their urgent cancer treatment, the worst on record. So will the Prime Minister help boost cancer survival rates by guaranteeing that every patient can start their cancer treatment within 62 days?
Well, I thank him for that question on a really important issue, and there's a report out by Lord Darcy tomorrow which will set out in stark terms the failure in terms of cancer treatment under the last government, which is a really serious issue. This timeline matters, which is why we're taking steps straight away to make sure that we can comply with that timeline, because lives depend on it. And that's why we've already taken a decision to put more scanners in to catch this early and use technology. It's a very serious issue, very, very serious failure by the last government.
Sir Ed Davey.
Prime Minister, for that answer, and also look at the plans that the government is putting forward. Last night, Liberal Democrats voted against the withdrawing of winter fuel payments. We believe it's just wrong to balance the books by removing the support from pensioners. But we do understand that there are some difficult choices to be made to clear up the appalling financial mess left by the last Conservative government. One of the many reasons for that mess was the Conservatives prioritising tax cuts for the big banks, costing £4 billion a year.
They pay more tax.
So will the Prime Minister instead reverse those cuts so that we can afford to support millions of struggling pensioners through this very hard winter?
Well, I'll resist the temptation to get ahead of the budget. But look, what is important is that we recognise that there is this £22 billion black hole that's been left by the previous government. Now, I know that their practice was ignore it, to kick it into long grass. We're taking the tough decisions because I'm absolutely convinced that's the only way we can start rebuilding our country, investing in our public services and making sure that everybody is better off.
Well, that's Ed Davey there. We've got both of his questions. And I would just say his wheat sheaf is enormous. It's a triple.
Yes.
Laura, the meat of that question there was, will you cut a tax break to banks in order to fund fuel payments?
Essentially, it was a question about the upcoming budget, and from the Liberal Democrats' perspective, they think that you can take more money from the banks. They set that out quite clearly in their manifesto and have spoken about it a number of times since. And of course, they will be very shortly celebrating their annual conference. So I'm sure we'll hear much more from them on that. And obviously, Ed Davey won't have expected Keir Starmer to make a financial commitment in PMQs there, so it wasn't really a question that you would expect firm detail from. It was more an opportunity for him to talk a bit more about health and social care, which they think is one of the key issues that helped them win so many seats in the recent election.
Tim, where are the Lib Dems at the moment? Because I mean, I was very struck that first question, the question on cancer treatment, and in fact, Mike's texted and pointed out that he asked a question about cancer treatment, and Keir answered about diagnosis, perhaps not understanding it. But that was like a kind of we will be helpful to you when you're in government if you follow these important agendas that we're bringing to your attention, kind of thing. That wasn't a fighty question. Then the second one was.
I mean, the Lib Dems actually tend to do much better when Labour are in the ascendancy. For whatever reason politically. I mean, look, they've had their best result ever, and they will hope to be in a position to build on that next time round. But they seem to be sort of very much into constructive opposition. I mean, I think the most striking thing, almost more than what he said, is sort of how he said it. Davey is, you could say he's low energy, but it's very kind of sort of attempt to be statesmanlike and sort of reasonable. And I mean, he was talking so quietly, you could literally hear Chris Philp from the Tory benches heckling him. You can't normally identify who the heckler is, but he was sort of louder than Ed Davey was being, even off mic. So, yeah, it's a kind of we'll praise where it's deserved and we'll have a go where it isn't. But, the bottom line is most Lib Dem seats are fought against the Conservatives rather than against the Labour Party.
So there was a voice in there I heard during the first question just going, what? which is always the best heckles. Just like, what? Ria, look, Ed Davey, he'd been around a while, but he burst into public consciousness during the election in a new way by sort of rafting and wearing speedos.
Yeah,
and
he
doing,
surfed
doing,
into public consciousness, slid, climbed.
Yeah,
he
bungee jumped.
All the verbs into public consciousness. I enjoyed that very much. I thought he did I would love if more of PMQs had that kind of statesman likeness to it. That's a verb.
I feel we'd be out of business.
Yeah.
And
a little bit. We've got 45 minutes to fill here. You sure?
Yeah, well, less of the raspberries and everything else. He asked two questions and wow, you're right about the wheat sheaf. That was a burn all by itself. It was almost question number 3 from Davey. But I just it's like you're watching a game of table tennis or ping pong, and they're and obviously the more skilled you are, the smaller the bat you need, and every so often Keir Starmer puts down his table tennis bat and gets out a massive tennis racket and just answers in the most general terms. And I feel like when he answers in that way, and I'm not saying that Rishi didn't do it when he was on the other side of the box, but when he answers in such general terms, it really just negates the purpose of the entire exercise. If he just goes, and I pull out my black hole card and I will respond to this with and you're right, he totally, 62 days to my mind is an outrageous amount of time to wait for cancer treatment, and he's asking him to commit to that. I thought that was I think it's crazy that we're at that point.
Laura, before I let all of you go, Ed Davey, is he a strong PMQs performer generally? I mean, you've been watching all the follow-up questions so intently for quite some time now. Is he someone you can normally rely on to land a blow?
Tim will know this. We very often feature Ed Davey in our PMQs best of the list, but sometimes people aren't that happy with it. I think
sometimes that's a generous ruling.
Right, I understand.
I think. What do I think about that? I think that Ed Davey has definitely graduated slightly. He used to very, very, very often, and actually, to be honest, he did this in the most recent PMQs, but he likes to use, and Jeremy Corbyn did this a lot, you'll remember, personal tales of people that have had very difficult circumstances, particularly in issues around health and social care. What that does, of course, is it adds a sense of gravity, but it also means that you can't really be jeered at by the opposition benches. And it was very useful to him during the Post Office inquiry scandal when, the Conservative benches especially were hoping to laugh at him whenever he stood to his feet. So he does tend to do that. And he's not one for particularly memorable questions. I personally don't know if you can remember any of them, Tim.
Well, let's look at it this way. He gets 2 questions every week. Is he always the first one we do on Best of the Rest? No. Right. Whereas when it was the SNP doing it, every single week they had something punchy and
that's true.
Yeah, sure.
Exciting.
Yeah, understood. Look, it's time to let you all go. Ria, where can people come see you?
If you go to my website, rialina.com, and all the lists of my appearances are there. But I'm on the circuit right now working up to the next tour, which starts in autumn 2025.
Wonderful. Laura Spirit, she will be in your inbox in a couple of hours with PMQs Unpacked and her excellent email. Thank you, Laura, for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you, Tim Shipman of the Sunday Times. And I will see you again right here next week. No, I won't. Not next week. There's no PMQs next week. Right here, next time we do this, whenever I get told that is, when I get better at doing this job. Wonderful. This is Hugo Rifkind here on Times Radio. Thanks all very much.
Visit Times Radio on YouTube for the latest videos and interviews.
Discover awe-inspiring Antarctica with HX Hurtigruten Expeditions. Kayak through the icy landscape and see penguin colonies and humpback whales up close on this all-inclusive adventure. Book now to save up to 20% on selected trips, backed by our price promise. Search Travel HX to find your 2025-26 expedition cruise. Conditions apply. HX. Change the way you see the world.
By the time I was 9, I stopped dreaming of ever starting school.
Ali was born into conflict in Syria. He never had the chance to learn until he arrived at a Save the Children refugee camp classroom.
Bravo!
When he learnt to write his name for the first time, aged 9.
I was wrong to ever stop believing.
Today there are 250 million children unable to go to school. But together, we can stand up for every child's right to education.